Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Learning environments in discourse analysis. Interactive assistant learning environments refer to the physical, social, and linguistic contexts in which education and learning take place, such as classrooms, online platforms, or informal educational settings. In discourse analysis, the study of learning environments focuses on how language shapes teaching, learning, and interaction among students and teachers. Discourse in these settings reveals how knowledge is constructed, how power dynamics operate, how identities are formed, and how social relations are negotiated. The language used in learning environments plays a key role in fostering or inhibiting participation, shaping learning experiences, and influencing academic success. By analyzing teacher-student interactions, peer communication, and instructional practices, discourse analysts uncover how language reflects educational norms, values, and ideologies. This analysis also helps to explore how language supports or challenges inclusion, authority, engagement, and student autonomy within the learning environment. Key features of learning environments in discourse analysis. 1. Teacher-student interaction. The language used in teacher-student interactions is crucial in shaping learning outcomes. Discourse analysis investigates how teachers use language to instruct, question, encourage participation, and provide feedback. It also examines how students respond to these interactions and how they are positioned as learners. Example: a teacher might ask a question like, "Can anyone explain how we arrived at this answer?" to encourage student participation. Discourse analysis would explore how this language creates an inclusive learning environment by inviting students to actively engage in problem solving, rather than positioning the teacher as the sole source of knowledge. 2. Power dynamics and authority. Power dynamics in learning environments often manifest through language, as teachers are positioned as authority figures, and students as learners. Discourse analysis examines how language reinforces or challenges these dynamics, focusing on how authority is communicated and negotiated. Example: in a classroom discussion, a teacher might say, "That's an interesting point, but here's the correct answer," reinforcing their role as the ultimate authority on the subject matter. Discourse analysis would explore how this language reinforces hierarchical structures in the classroom, potentially limiting student agency in the learning process. 3. Student agency and autonomy. Language in learning environments can either support or inhibit student agency and autonomy. Discourse analysis looks at how students are positioned as active or passive participants in their learning and how language encourages critical thinking, self-expression, and independence. Example: a teacher might use language like, "What do you think would happen if we changed this variable?" encouraging students to think critically and explore answers independently. Discourse analysis would explore how this open-ended questioning fosters student autonomy by empowering students to take ownership of their learning. 4. Socialization and identity formation. Learning environments are also spaces where social identities are constructed and negotiated. Discourse analysis examines how language shapes students' identities in relation to their peers, teachers, and the broader educational system, focusing on how students are categorized or labeled. Example: a teacher might refer to students as high achievers or struggling learners, categorizing them based on academic performance. Discourse analysis would investigate how these labels shape students' identities and social roles within the classroom, potentially reinforcing or challenging existing social hierarchies. 5. Inclusion and exclusion. Discourse analysis in learning environments also investigates issues of inclusion and exclusion, particularly in relation to language barriers, cultural diversity, and educational equity. This analysis focuses on how language can either support or marginalize students from different backgrounds. Example: in an English language classroom, a teacher might say, "Let's make sure everyone understands this concept before we move on," signaling an inclusive approach. Discourse analysis would examine how this language ensures that all students, including non-native speakers or students with learning differences, are included in the learning process. 6. Classroom talk and participation. The way classroom discussions are structured can either foster or inhibit participation. Discourse analysis examines how language is used to manage classroom talk, encourage student contributions, and create an environment where all voices are heard. Example: a teacher might use a phrase like, "Let's hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet," to encourage quieter students to participate. Discourse analysis would explore how this language helps create a more balanced and participatory learning environment, ensuring that diverse perspectives are represented in classroom discussions. 7. Instructional practices and language. Instructional practices in learning environments are heavily influenced by the language used to communicate concepts, give directions, and assess understanding. Discourse analysis examines how language supports learning by making complex ideas accessible and reinforcing key concepts. Example: a math teacher might explain a concept by saying, "Think of this equation as a balance. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other," using metaphorical language to make abstract concepts easier to understand. Discourse analysis would investigate how this type of language aids in the comprehension of difficult subjects. Methods for analyzing learning environments in discourse. 1. Conversation analysis. Conversation analysis looks at the structure and flow of interactions in learning environments, focusing on turn-taking, interruptions, and question-response patterns. This method helps to uncover how classroom talk is managed and how teachers and students co-construct knowledge through dialogue. Example: a conversation analysis of a classroom discussion might examine how teachers follow up on student answers, either by expanding on their ideas or redirecting the conversation. The analysis would reveal how language structures participation and knowledge building in the classroom. 2. Critical discourse analysis, CDA. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, examines how language in learning environments reflects broader social, political, and institutional power dynamics. CDA focuses on how educational discourse reinforces or challenges hierarchies and ideologies, particularly regarding race, gender, class, and ability. Example: a CDA of classroom interactions might explore how language reinforces traditional gender roles, such as when boys are praised for being assertive, while girls are encouraged to be polite and compliant. The analysis would examine how this language reflects broader societal expectations and shapes students' gender identities. 3. Frame analysis. Frame analysis investigates how classroom topics and activities are framed through language, focusing on how issues are presented and how this framing influences student engagement and understanding. Example: in a science class, a teacher might frame a lesson as exploring how things work in the real world, which could increase student interest by connecting abstract concepts to practical applications. Frame analysis would explore how this language affects student motivation and curiosity. 4. Multimodal discourse analysis. Multimodal discourse analysis examines how different modes of communication, speech, writing, visuals, are used together in learning environments to convey meaning and support learning. This method is especially useful for analyzing how teachers combine verbal instruction with visual aids or technology. Example: in a blended learning environment, a teacher might use a combination of digital slides, videos, and spoken explanations to teach a lesson. Multimodal discourse analysis would explore how these different modes work together to enhance comprehension and engagement. Examples of learning environments in discourse analysis. Example 1. Encouraging student participation in classroom discussions. In a high school history class, a teacher might say, "Who wants to start us off with their thoughts on today's reading?" Discourse analysis would examine how this open-ended question encourages student participation, creating a space where students feel empowered to share their perspectives. The analysis might also explore how follow-up questions foster deeper engagement and critical thinking. Example 2. Power dynamics in higher education seminars. In a university seminar, a professor might dominate the conversation by frequently interrupting students or redirecting the discussion. Discourse analysis would investigate how these interruptions reinforce the professor's authority and potentially discourage student contributions, shaping the power dynamics of the learning environment. Example 3. Language of feedback in elementary classrooms. A teacher might say, "You're getting better at this, but you need to focus on your spelling," providing both positive feedback and constructive criticism. Discourse analysis would explore how this language balances encouragement with instruction, shaping the student's learning experience by reinforcing areas of strength while addressing areas for improvement. Example 4. Digital learning and interaction on online platforms. In an online learning environment, a teacher might use the chat function to ask, "Can someone summarize what we just covered?" encouraging students to engage in written dialogue. Discourse analysis would examine how digital platforms influence the way students interact and participate, focusing on how language is used to facilitate learning in a virtual space. Example 5. Addressing diversity in the classroom. A teacher might say, "Let's think about how this concept applies to different cultures," in a social studies lesson. Discourse analysis would investigate how this language fosters an inclusive learning environment by encouraging students to consider diverse perspectives, thus promoting cultural awareness and sensitivity. Challenges in analyzing learning environments through discourse. 1. Capturing authentic classroom interactions. Classroom discourse is dynamic and can vary widely depending on the context, making it difficult to capture the full complexity of interactions. Discourse analysts must account for variables like class size, subject matter, and teacher style when analyzing language in learning environments. 2. Navigating power imbalances. The inherent power imbalance between teachers and students can complicate the analysis of language in learning environments. Discourse analysts must be careful to explore how power is exercised and negotiated, and how students are positioned within these dynamics. 3. Cultural and linguistic diversity. Learning environments are often culturally and linguistically diverse, which can affect how language is used and interpreted. Discourse analysts must consider how cultural norms, language proficiency, and diverse backgrounds influence communication and learning outcomes. Conclusion. Discourse analysis in learning environments offers valuable insights into how language shapes the educational experience. By examining teacher-student interactions, instructional practices, power dynamics, and the social construction of knowledge, discourse analysis reveals the ways in which language facilitates or hinders learning, inclusion, and student engagement. Understanding how discourse operates in educational settings is essential for creating more equitable, participatory, and effective learning environments that support the diverse needs of all students. Through this analysis, educators and researchers can improve communication strategies, enhance classroom dynamics, and promote positive learning outcomes. Frequently asked questions. What is discourse analysis in learning environments? Discourse analysis in learning environments examines how language shapes teaching, learning, and interaction. It focuses on communication and educational settings such as classrooms, online platforms, or informal learning spaces, exploring how language influences knowledge construction, power dynamics, and student engagement. Why is studying discourse in learning environments important? Understanding how language functions in educational settings helps reveal the role of communication in shaping students' identities, fostering inclusion, managing classroom power dynamics, and facilitating or hindering participation and learning. It provides insights for creating more effective and inclusive educational practices. How do teacher-student interactions influence learning? Teacher-student interactions set the tone for learning experiences. The language teachers use to instruct, question, and provide feedback can encourage or inhibit participation and shape students' perceptions of themselves as learners. Discourse analysis examines how these interactions position students within the educational process. What role does language play in classroom power dynamics? Language often reflects and enforces power dynamics, with teachers positioned as authority figures. Phrases like, "That's an interesting point, but here's the right answer," reinforce hierarchy. Discourse analysis investigates how such language maintains or challenges these dynamics, influencing student autonomy and voice. How does discourse analysis explore student agency? Discourse analysis looks at how students are encouraged to take an active role in their learning. Language that invites exploration and open-ended questioning supports student agency by promoting critical thinking and independence. For example, "What do you think will happen if we change this variable?" fosters student-driven inquiry. How does language impact social identity in learning? Language in classrooms helps construct students' social identities, categorizing them through labels like high achievers or struggling learners. Discourse analysis reveals how these labels can shape self-perception and social roles, potentially reinforcing or disrupting existing social hierarchies. What does discourse analysis reveal about inclusion and exclusion in education? It shows how language can either support or marginalize students, particularly those from diverse backgrounds. For example, inclusive phrases like, "Let's ensure everyone understands before we move on," signal efforts to include all students, while excluding language can reinforce barriers to learning. How do instructional practices use language to support learning? Teachers use language to make complex concepts accessible, such as employing metaphors like, "Think of this equation as a balance," to simplify abstract ideas. Discourse analysis studies how these linguistic choices aid comprehension and reinforce learning. What methods are used in analyzing discourse in learning environments? Conversation analysis examines turn-taking and response patterns to uncover how knowledge is co-constructed. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, focuses on how language reflects social power dynamics and ideologies. Frame analysis investigates how topics are presented and the impact on student engagement. Multimodal discourse analysis analyzes the combination of speech, visuals, and text in conveying meaning. Can discourse analysis help improve teaching practices? Yes. By understanding how language shapes classroom dynamics, educators can adjust their communication strategies to foster participation, balance power, and create more inclusive and effective learning environments. This can lead to better student outcomes and a more supportive learning atmosphere.